Hey, Reflections on the Road with EDC Rocks, me, Andre Hedlund. And now let's talk about bilingualism. Yes, bilingualism, something I've been teaching a lot about actually in the last couple of years, especially 2 years. And I thought it would be an interesting idea for me to go over some of the myths surrounding bilingualism, right? For example, lots of parents, especially parents, families, right? They think that bilingualism is going to confuse the child, or that it's going to cause some sort of delay in their speech or whatever. Or, why don't my kids speak English when they come back to their homes, right? So they only produce English in the classroom. Against many myths. I think the first thing we should know is that we have to change our view from a monoglossic view to a heteroglossic view, which means that a bilingual subject is not only two monolinguals put together. It's not like you have two languages, L1 and the additional language, so their mother tongue and the additional language in boxes inside your brain. It's much more than that. It's like a network. So whenever they are learning an additional language, they're increasing their conceptual repertoire as well, their conceptual vocabulary. And then they can transit, let's say, between L1 and the additional language. And that means that bilingualism is more, it's not just using L1 and L2 or any additional language. It goes beyond that. So that's the very first thing. Lots of research from many different authors, especially Ellen Bialystok, for those of you who want to dig a little deeper, show us that bilingualism is great for the brain. Bilingualism is the norm, actually. So Jubin Abutalebi says that the brain did not evolve to accommodate one language only. So if you look at the statistics, I'd say that nearly 60% or a little above 60% of the world is bilingual, the world population, right? So that means that we were, designed for that, let's say, we evolved for that better. Now, is it going to cause any confusion? What parents might confuse, or take as confusion is not really confusion. It's kids experimenting with their linguistic repertoire, And I like to use an analogy of a musician composing a song, right? And sometimes this musician will go to the piano to play some chords. Sometimes he or she will go to the guitar, or maybe even the flute or the trumpet. It depends on the purpose. And that's what kids are doing, really. They're using their linguistic repertoire to test what works, what doesn't work, in which situation. And that's very interesting, right? It's not going to confuse them. A couple of things that might seem as confusion are very well established in the specialized literature. So if you want to know more about this, you should probably read Ofelia Garcia, Lee Wei, Colin Baker, right? They talk about the notion of code switching, code mixing, and translanguaging, which is natural. All of them are natural. And that basically means that whenever you're using one language, you might switch to use another language for a specific purpose. Maybe you don't know that word in that language, or maybe you do know, but it makes more sense to use that other language, right? And sometimes you're even going to mix things like suffixes and prefixes, right? And kids, they love to do that, especially when they're learning verb conjugations, right? So they use the ed suffix in their mother tongue, right? So and we have those cute moments when kids say very bizarre things that if you're not bilingual, you don't understand what they're saying, right? And translanguaging is something that we do all the time, especially as you become more proficient, is that you can really easily transit between one language and the other. But certain concepts, they make more sense in that language, and again, that language influences how you use your mother tongue as well, right? which is incredible. That's how amazing bilingualism is, right? And we do have some cognitive benefits, apparently, especially concerning executive functioning. So those higher order, let's say, cognitive abilities that we have for planning, organizing, prioritizing, decision making, inhibiting certain behaviors, or attention, really. So there's some controversy nowadays. Is it really executive functions or is it attention? But there are some models that propose that attention is one of the executive functions, right? So what we are doing as bilinguals all the time, we're inhibiting certain things. We want to say something, a concept, and our brain has to choose, is it going to be said in L1, first language, or in the additional language? This is actually great exercise for your brain. It's really strengthening the attentional network, the task positive network, when you're supposed to be focused and paying attention. And then you're going to get gains in memory, right? According to Eric Kandel, learning requires attention plus memory. So if you gain attention, you definitely gain memory and you gain learning. And we also have a bunch of studies showing that there's some gain in mathematical, logical thinking, reasoning, and things like that, right? Decision making, also inhibiting behaviors, right? Which is related to self-regulation. And kids with better self-regulation, they become more self-efficacious, so they can actually accomplish goals more easily, right? So is bilingualism bad for anything? I don't think so. It even increases your cognitive reserve, which means that it will protect your brain against neurodegenerative diseases like dementia for a couple of years, maybe even 6-7 years, between 5 and 7 years, right? There is one thing though, I guess, and this is really finding the word, like lexical access. If you show a kid a flashcard with an image, like let's say an animal, it normally takes the bilingual kid a little more time. The response time, it's a little longer to retrieve, to say, because you have to decide which language to use when you say the word, but it's really a fraction of a second longer. So again, is that a disadvantage? I don't think it is, right? Bilingualism is awesome. Bilingualism is something that will definitely give your students and your kids the edge and advantage for their academic life and professional life, certainly. And I think we have to talk about those myths that people believe in, right? Especially families. And there's one thing I forgot to talk about. Why is it that the kids, they don't say anything in English at home, right? Parents get desperate with that. Like, my kid has been going to your bilingual school for many months now, but when I ask them something at home, they don't know how to say it. And there is something about the context there, and there's also many things involved. How old is the kid? There's a silent period that they're taking in a lot of information, but it doesn't mean that they don't know how to produce. I mean, they probably produce in the classroom, and they can understand instructions. They know they can share intentions with their teachers. And at home, it doesn't really make sense in this child's brain to use that other language, because they never use that other language, and suddenly parents want them to do that. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So parents, be patient. Bilingualism is awesome. You should really, if you have the chance, raise bilingual kids. Is there a formula? There are many different ways to raise bilingual kids. Maybe one of the parents can talk to the kid in L2 or L plus, right? Additional language, while the other parent will use L1, or just send them to a bilingual school, and then they will be exposed to this additional language for a long time. And at home, you use your native language, or there are other ways. Look them up, really. But encourage kids to become bilingual. It's going to be awesome for their brain. Their brain is going to benefit a lot. Reflections on the road with EDC Rocks. I will record a couple of more videos, okay? Follow me, EDC Rocks and edcrocks.com, my website. Bye-bye, folks.